Hi, everyone. Hi, as Katie said, I am the head of coaching here at Makers, and I'm really passionate about helping people, all sorts of people, become software developers. And so today, what I wanted to share is a little bit how we, like a bit of a part of our education philosophy and how we help people in the hope that you can use it when you're mentoring or when you're onboarding new developers into your own companies or around you. Let me start here. Let me start here. So here, what you see is a pyramid, and this pyramid is one of the fundamental ideas of Makers' philosophy. And this idea is that everything you learn, you can learn on several different levels. You can learn at the level of concrete. So that's maybe, oh, what's the syntax to write a function in Ruby? That's very concrete fact, right? You can learn on the level of concepts. So concepts would be, after you've written a bunch of functions in Ruby, following the syntax, you can think more about what is a function? How do I, like, what do they do? Why would you use them? This type of questions. What is it? Why? And then if you, and then the idea is that the next level emerges from that. So the concept emerged from the concrete, and then the skills emerge from you having spent quite a bit of time handling concretes and handling concepts, and you'll build your skills, which is you'll build your way to use functions in any place. You'll know what steps to take. You know how to unblock yourself. You've developed processes, and that's really important for us. And then behaviors is even at the top of this, when you start to realize that actually, you know, this programming concept could be used in any part of your life. In fact, if you think of goal setting and you've learned TDD in programming, you realize, well, it's just the same. So behavior is when it's so ingrained that now it's part of your core identity. And I want to say that most of the time, developers out in the world, either self-taught or who went through university, they've done a bunch of concretes because they've practiced programming, and then at uni they learn a lot of concepts. But uni doesn't bother teaching you the skills as much. They just rely on this really important fact that skills and behaviors will just emerge from you doing enough concretes and concepts. And that's true, and it works, but it takes years. And at Makers, we don't have years to create developers who will have those skills. And so because it's 3 months, we have made some choices. And the choice we make is that we focus on the skills and behavior as opposed to focusing on the concepts and concretes. So there are some reasons for that. First of all, the concepts and concretes are parts of tech that evolve all the time, especially the concretes. Syntax of things evolves all the time. And great material about concrete and concepts can be found online. And in fact, it's a little bit pretentious to believe that you're going to be the bootcamp that creates the best material out there about every single concrete when it changes all the time. However, skills and behaviors are not things that you can pick up online as much. Skills and behavior come from working with experienced developers, and that's where the coaches come in. And so as coaches, what we do is we really focus on skills and behavior as opposed to concept and concrete. Developers will work with concepts and concretes during bootcamp, but every time they come to us, we try to really engage with them on the level of skills and behavior. And if you think of learning a language, this is a little bit as if you were like concepts and concretes are the vocabulary, and they'll make sentences, but skills and behavior is like teaching them the grammars, teaching them a rule to make a whole new sentence based on the vocabulary that they know. And I'm going to show you how to do this in practice. So let's think of an example. You have someone who comes to you with a very specific question. That's very common. That's something I see in the bootcamp every day. When developers come to us, typically they're blocked on something. They have code and it's not working. They have a specific error. They don't know how to solve it. And if you're in a company, I'm sure you see a lot of new developers come to you with very specific bug, very specific problem. And when you have some experience of the code that they're working on, it's quite common that you actually know exactly what is going wrong. You've seen this 20 times, you know exactly what is wrong, and you could absolutely engage there and say, well, did you forget maybe that line in the config? Or maybe here, are you passing a number instead of a string? You can engage that way, but if you're doing that, you're missing something big. First of all, it makes you look like you're a wizard. And this is something that already exists in spades in the tech industry. You don't want people to feel like experienced devs have this innate knowledge. They just know right away what things are. I'll never get there. So it can be quite discouraging when someone answers to you on that wizard level, right? And it's actually rare to have questions. A lot of developers maybe will feel a little bit a bit shame. I don't know if shame is the right word, but they will not necessarily ask a question for fear of feeling stupid. And if you answer like a wizard, you may make them feel stupid, even though you're really, really, really trying to be helpful. And so if you have a question, to me, you really need to seize that opportunity, because it's a rare opportunity for learning. Let me give you a metaphor here. So imagine when you have a dev, a new dev who's working on a tech problem, a lot of the time this is what they see. Look at this image. This is maybe what they're seeing. And if you ask them, if you're seeing this image, and I ask you, what needs to come to the right of this? If I was to continue painting this image on the right, what needs to come? Well, you don't know. It's hard to know, because when you're a junior, you're so close to the picture that you don't know what is happening. And when you're an experienced dev instead, this is what you see, right? You have the context, you have the whole picture. And so for you, it's really easy to say, well, if they ask you, what do I need to write at the right of this? You could say, well, just put a little bit more black, and then you'll put a band of white, and then kind of like a curve of black. But if you just tell them that, they may be able to get to the solution, but they will never really have learned how to get them themselves. So what you want is to share what you see. And so let's look at how you can do that. So here are a few different things that makers coaches do when asked a question. The first one is asking the devs more questions. And this is important because it may be that actually the developer who's coming to you is really close to finding the answer, right? And maybe it's just a small thing that they haven't seen, but by asking them 1 or 2 questions, they'll solve it themselves. And if you can get that, then it's the best, absolute best outcome. Because if they solve it themselves, it really increases their confidence, and they know they can do it. So absolutely always the first thing to try, ask them more questions to try and see, what are they seeing? Are they at this point, or are they at this point, or are they somewhere between where they can already kind of help themselves? Now, if they're not seeing, or if it doesn't just take 1 or 2 questions, what you can do is describe your process. Don't answer the question by saying this is what you need to do, but instead imagine that this is the very first time you're meeting this error. How would you do it? How would you solve it? What would you research? Who would you ask? How do you navigate the documentation here? Where do you print in your code to get answers? And so at Makers, because we do a lot of skills and processes, we think a lot about those processes, and we have kind of thought about what are the different steps of different processes, what are the steps of debugging. But this still has its limitation. If you just describe your process, the really difficult part is that you can only describe something that you've really thought about, right? And a lot of the time, actually, you do, as a programmer, you do a lot of things that you're not even conscious of. And so when that fails, what you want to do is actually model it for them. And this, to me, is the most powerful tool you have with junior developers, or any developer, really. And it's that they will learn by observing you in your process, because there are many things that we do unconsciously, as I said. So one example would be if I Google, the way I choose my search terms, they're not random. I would have a hard time describing how I chose those terms, but they're not random either. And if someone observes me, then they may actually see a difference that I have a hard time putting into words, because I just have chunked that knowledge and now I don't think about it anymore. Another thing is, when I write code, I don't write code top to bottom. I typically write the start of a function and the end, and then I fill in the middle. And sometimes if I need a helper function, I will use it right there and then, even before I've written the core of it. But this thing that I can tell it to you now, because I have modeled it for devs and they've pointed that, wait, you don't just write code top to bottom. And now I have reflected and now I know that these things are things that I do. But devs will pick them up by observing you, even if you don't know your own process. And this is where modeling is the most powerful. Pairing with someone and just doing what you do and let them ask the question. This is what helps. And then finally, the last thing that you want to do after you've done all of this, they have come with an error or a problem or a question, and you've asked them some questions to see where they are. You have described your process. You have modeled it for them. Now you want to reflect with them. How would they now describe that process? How would they solve a similar problem in the future? And reflect here at this point. What it means is that it just multiplies this experience. Instead of having to, for years, do write a lot of different pieces of code and then see emerging concepts and processes. Now, maybe they've written 1 or 2 pieces of code, but through this reflection, they can multiply it and make each piece of code they write worth, weeks of practice. So hopefully these tips have helped you think about how to engage with questions from developers. And that's pretty much all I wanted to share with you today. Thank you very much.